It's been really interesting over the last couple of days asking the government whether they were pleased or disappointed that the US entered the conflict over the weekend. Didn't get any answer at all yesterday. This morning, Pat McFadden said, well, he certainly wasn't disappointed. Where's the Conservatives on this?
So I've been clear about this, I think, since Sunday morning, effectively, that I felt the action was absolutely essential and necessary. Primarily because, let's be clear, this was all about degrading Iran's nuclear capabilities. And that's a good thing for us and our country and for our allies. We all know about Iran. We know too much about their motivation. They are funding proxies around the world, terrorist proxies, and they're a threat to our country, as well as the fact that they spend too much time calling for death to America, and they want to eliminate the only Jewish state in the world, which is Israel. That's not acceptable. I think your point is important. The government has not been able to say, I was in Parliament yesterday, whether or not they supported this action or took a view on this action. And I think the British people need clarity. They need to know whether or not their own government, the government of the day, backed the action.
In terms of the latest developments this morning, of course, it's early days. We don't know if things will hold, but it seems that this has worked, that there is a ceasefire deal in place that the Iranians, the Israelis and the US are all signed up to. Does that show that the tactic that President Trump employed worked, or is there luck involved and we need to be careful about getting involved in these sorts of conflicts?
So I think, first of all, look, we welcome the ceasefire announcement, and this could be the pathway to de-escalation. It is early days, really early days. The onus still has to be on Iran. I think, importantly, there are a couple of things to say here now. We should never underestimate the President of the United States, because he has been very committed to bringing Iran to the table from the outset. I think as soon as he came into the White House this year, it was the President that basically tried to bring Iran to the table, and it was during those talks, if you remember, that it was then discovered through the IAEA that Iran was still enriching too much in terms of nuclear materials, which led to a lot of great concern and worry. It's early days. I think it's important, and the President has said, even after those strikes at the weekend, that he wanted peace, particularly between Iran and Israel. So this could be a constructive way forward. We've got to wait and see. The onus has to be on Iran. Iran has to degrade its capabilities, stop doing what it's doing, be much more transparent, while at the same time it's got to stop firing missiles. And let's not forget, you're showing an interview soon with President Zelensky, which Mark Austin has undertaken. Iran is funding and supporting Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine. We cannot ignore that. So there are many stakes here, and you've asked about Britain's involvement. We are involved with regards to Ukraine and our strong commitment and defence of Ukraine.
Well, let's touch on Russia and Ukraine now, because, you know, this sort of peace through strength example that perhaps has been the cause for the ceasefire deal did involve the US directly attacking America's allies' enemy in Iran. They have not done that in the Ukraine-Russia war. Whilst you praise Donald Trump over the course of his actions over this weekend, do you criticise him when it comes to not doing the same sort of forceful, whether economic, rhetoric or military action towards Russia? I
don't. And there are some very good reasons. I was Home Secretary when Russia illegally invaded Ukraine. I remember being in government working with the US administration and other allies around the world. It was Britain, actually. Think about our leadership back then in terms of convincing others to stand tall and to fight for Ukraine. They're fighting for freedom and democracy in European soil. Let me get to the point here. President Trump, since he has become president, has constantly been looking to find ways in which we can find a better way ahead. They've signed an agreement with the Ukraine to help them in this battle and this conflict. We have a lot of responsibility ourselves. I know NATO's meeting today as NATO countries to step up, not just on funding, but actually securing Ukraine's future through the right avenues. There's a lot more to do here. This isn't just about bombing or taking action just against Russia. Action has been taken, sanctions, for example. You know, look at the way their economy is hurting. Our combined economy in terms of NATO countries is much stronger than Russia's economy. We have a lot of leverage there. The difference between Russia and Iran is that Iran were enriching uranium. They had enough enriched uranium to basically put together nuclear devices and to use them. It's a country that sponsors terrorism around the Middle East. In our own country, they're a state threat to us, and they publicly keep on saying their stated aim is to eliminate Israel. We cannot have that.
Let's talk about the NATO summit and this announcement that the government is making alongside all NATO countries, perhaps outside of Spain, 3.5% on core defence spending, 5% overall on national security by 2035. Do you support that?
We haven't seen any funding come forward. I think we've got to be honest about this. My party has been very clear. We were the party, basically, that persuaded Keir Starmer's government to increase defence spending to 2.5 GDP through changes to the development funding. And we've been clear, we need to see 3% by 2029, the end of this Parliament, and we know that we would back that and support that through ways in which scrapping the Chagos surrender deal, for example, doing much more through development funding. There's no new money. The government needs to be really honest about this. And I say this because, number one, it's Armed Forces Week. We see the conflicts that we're seeing around the world. Yes, Keir Starmer's going to NATO, but given an unfunded spending commitment that basically takes us into the next decade is simply not acceptable. Again, you heard President Zelensky in his interview saying 10 years is too long. The crises and the issues and the challenges are now. We need a government that basically is going to protect our country at home and abroad and put that money in now. And they have to be tested and challenged on how they're going to put money into this now.
Just wanted to finish with a question on welfare spending. We talked about this with Pat McFadden. It sounds like there's an amendment that may or may not get voted on that would see watering down of some of the reforms they want to do. Is this an area where you actually back the government rather than the rebels that they have within their party wanting to water it down?
So what I'd say here is that when the government is, and I actually reformed welfare back in 2015. I was a minister that took legislation through Parliament and worked alongside Ian Duncan Smith to bring in universal credit. The answer is no, because look at what the government are doing. This is just a patchwork of rhetoric around welfare reform. There isn't a considered plan. What they're proposing would be cuts to people that have personal independence payments. They'll be hurting people that are disabled, while effectively trying to say that they're making up for it by putting more money into universal credit for working people. We need to change the welfare system radically and bring in proper reforms. These are not structural reforms to the welfare system that would get people off welfare and into work, which is a type of proposal that we would be putting forward. And I know the last Conservative government, I wasn't in that government, had plans along that line. I was involved in those types of policies previously and took legislation through Parliament. I think the government have got serious problems on their hands here. This is sticking plaster. They're not going for full welfare reform, and now they've got a problem with their own parliamentary handling.
But I think I'm right in saying that you ultimately would like to see reform to the welfare bill and indeed see the welfare bill brought down. This is an aim from the government to do that, but either to cause the government a headache or, despite coming from the totally opposite end of the spectrum to the rebels within the Labour Party,
sure,
you're saying that you're going to vote with the rebels?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not going to get into how my party is going to vote. That's a separate discussion. I'm talking about the fundamental principle of welfare reform, which could lead, let's be honest, to structural changes in our country, which our economy needs. We need more working-age people in work. That's where we should be. This shouldn't be about the tinkering that this government is doing just with PIP and disability benefits. It's for the government to handle this problem. It's not for us in opposition to tell them how to manage their parliamentary party and which amendments their people should sign up to. This isn't the right kind of welfare reform. This is just literally more smoke and mirrors from this government. And I just think it's not going to help people that need to be helped and supported to get back into work.
Shadow Foreign Secretary, good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.